I mean, I'm sure it's not.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Good evening, everyone. I'll now call the regular council meeting of August 9th, 2022 to order. Councilor Hopkins sends her regrets. Welcome. We'll move to item 2.1. The meeting is open to statements of no more than 5 members of the public, no more than 2 minutes in length each.
Mr. Bodnar, would you like to start?
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't have time to change. My name is Johannes. I'm with the Lower and District Chamber of Commerce. This evening, I just wanted to make a quick note on agenda item 11.3, which is the report to approve the SLRD bylaw, cited as the Economic Development Service Establishment bylaw. I just had a very long board meeting about this motion in particular, and I can report back that there are a lot of opinions on this, and there's a lot of passion behind this. And the conclusion that my board has asked me to convey to all of you is that at the current moment, we feel like this is an incredibly complicated topic. The creation or the consent of electors to the district of the District of Lillooet to the adoption of an SLRD bylaws, but to create a tax category is an incredibly complicated topic. And given that the council agenda was passed on or made public on Friday, my board doesn't feel confident that we have enough information to really make a decision on this topic. And we would like to ask our members how they feel about something like this. And of course, in those 4 days, we didn't really have time to do that. So that's one of the points that I was just asked to convey, that a complex topic like this needs a lot of time and consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. I think Ms. Jones. Nice.
Would you like me next?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Johannes, but I don't think it's that complicated. This is about setting up a mechanism between Area B of the Squamish Regional District and Lillooet to have in place a bylaw whereby if we agree by mutual consent for our mutual benefit to fund a project, that we could then proceed. We wouldn't do that without a clear agreement being made ahead of time. Clearly, I am interested in doing this for agriculture, which is what we've been talking about. But it could also be applied to other things, like other common interests that we have. You know, as Area B, I contributed to the recreation center, revitalization of Downton Park, solar panels, all kinds of things that we have where we have kind of mutual benefit and mutual interest. I've seen this work, Pemberton and Area C, like Area B here, surrounds Pemberton, and Russell Mack and the mayor of Pemberton and the council of Pemberton work together on common projects like the recreation center, their friendship trail that winds all the way through and up to the reserve and so forth. And so this bylaw is about having something in place. So in the future, in our optimistic future, and I mean, ideally with a larger tax base, but working with what we have now, we could come to an agreement to fund projects like Lillooet Agriculture and Food on an annual basis so that those groups would have some stability and security going forward. And I do believe that groups like Lillooet agriculture and food do benefit not just Area B, but also the citizens of Lillooet, and that they are well worth funding. And so, let's see, we're going to talk about. Yeah. We have some in existence already, some shared service agreements where they're historic, but they're still current. The best example I can think of is search and rescue. We're already taxing in Area B as well as Lillooet and I think Area A as well for search and rescue, and with Lillooet Agriculture and Foods for some of the other projects in the future, we could look at doing a similar shared service model. The bylaw will allow us, it's a mechanism that we would put in place to do that. So I think that's what I'll say.
Thank you.
About that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Zachary Zeidler. I'm Architects Creek Ranch. I'm the president and operating officer of Clifton Orchard Vineyards. First off, worship, I hope in your discretion, I'm going to try to get this done in half the time. That maybe if more than 5 people want to say something, that might get left. In my operation, I spend a lot of time with my visitors and I talk to them a lot and I give them about as much information as they give me. They don't know that they're giving it to me. What I do know is that there's a tremendous amount of interest in Lillooet, and there's a growing visitor base that are spending overnights here. They're patronizing all kinds of businesses here. Everybody wants to know where to go for dinner, where they can spend their money in Lillooet. So what benefit we get as a farmer, I think there's many multiples that come into this community. Anyway, I'm not on any boards or anything right now, so I'm representing only myself here tonight. But I was on the inaugural board of the Ag Committee, developed the Ag Plan, which then was handed over to labs for implementation on a very long-term basis. Today I did a review, having been on your side of the table for many, many years. Did a review of a whole bunch of budgets, including 492 pages for the SLRD, built funding, select funds, this, that, everything else. I also went with the year budget. Nowhere in there do I see anything around economic development. There's zero. There's nothing. Agriculture, we were all excited about it a decade or more ago when the AAC was started. I'm infinitely more excited about it today than I am then. I think it's going to bring investment in this community. And let me just say it this way. We're farmers. A lot of us are out in Area B, not all of us. A lot of us are out there. Let us help Lillooet in economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public input? Yes.
Hello, my name is Sam Quinlan. I'm speaking on from 10 years of experience growing organic hops in Lillooet. Come from the School of Hard Knocks, tried really hard to establish a new unique crop in Lillooet, established a cooperative on 5 farms from in Gallicum to Lytton to process, to bring real agriculture to Lillooet. But the School of Hard Knocks taught me that the market didn't want that. So as much as we tried hard, threw a lot of money in it, at the end of the day, we really tried hard to bring local hops to breweries in British Columbia. They didn't want to pay the high price. They wanted imported hops. And that's what the School of Hard Knocks taught me about agriculture. What I know about agriculture is the thing that really changes, moves the dial, are farmers, hardworking farmers who get direct support and with people in town who support them. And I know that I've written a lot of grants my day to keep the hops growing for many years in British Columbia. But at the end of the day, it wasn't funding that did it. It was the market matched with the desire and the hard work of farmers to make that happen. I think there's a lot of ways in which we can bolster the local agricultural sector here. In my opinion, tax doesn't do that. I think there's a lot more factors at play. The money that's being requested is only $32,000. I think, having agriculture drives, getting donations, having those people who truly support local agriculture in town would gladly put their dollar on that. There's a lot of people in town who just like gardening in their backyard. There's a lot of people in town who just love buying whatever's available at Bio, whether it's local or not. Not everyone is in support of this, and I think we're growing the sector here, but the tax isn't the way to do that. It's not a catch-all. It's not and I just think there are better ways in which we can support local agriculture as opposed to implementing a new tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we'll move on to item 3. Any late additions and deletions to the agenda? I see 2 items here for the
We have 2 items, 18.1 under new business, stage 2 water conservation measures, sorry, 18.1. And item 18.2, associate member liability insurance for a fire inspector. Thank you.
Any other additions or deletions, council? Hearing none, I need someone to move that the August 9th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda be adopted as amended. Seconds. Councillor Howe, second Councillor Leach. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, go to item 4.1. Delegation, Route 99 Car Club. Mr. Coop.
Yeah, my name's Al Coop. Wayne couldn't be here today, so I'm just kind of here to tell you the direction we're going. We are a nonprofit organization, and we sure have appreciated all the help the district has given us in the past. Because we're a nonprofit, we support 2 bursaries. We support 100 people in care, and we also, when the Legion was in business, we gave them an $1,800 ice machine. That and we're self-sufficient now. We have enough money where we can pay our insurances and you know, get everything prepared for the next event. So, you know, we're going to have money to give away. We don't know what, we could use ideas what to do with it. That's kind of the gist of where we are, and apparently there's things going on behind the scenes to make it a multi-use facility, the airport. And we counseled it, how many places, and we counseled again this week where people called, they want to spend a few days here. And like he said, Lillooet, there are people that want to come here, where Lillooet is becoming on the map. It is coming on the map. And we can put it on the map, but what we're doing here, very much so. So a couple of things I'd like to ask council and district. Number one, parking, motorhome parking at the airport. If that could be talked about, because that's going to give us some really big names and big cars. I'm not talking tents and just strictly guys with big cars, big motorhomes parked there. That's it. No fires, no camping. It's just motorhome parking. We can get some really big people in here, big cars. That's one thing that's stopping us. There was a few. There was a kind of noise going on that the district's losing fuel sales because we're having the drag races. That is absolutely not true. We always leave room for helicopters to come in and land. The planes to come in, we always shut down. We have a radio, we shut down, we let them land, we fuel up. We are not taking any fuel sales away from the district. But yeah, we can make this, we can really make this thing go. And with your help, we can do a really good job with this. And if anybody knows any volunteers, we could sure use it. Because me and Wayne seem to be doing most of this, and it's a lot of work to put on the desk. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coop. Maybe the
Any
council,
questions?
yeah, they may have some questions for clarification.
Okay.
Counselor Lee?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hear you going by every once in a while.
Yeah, probably making some noise.
Well, good. I'm just teasing you. The new gentleman in town, John White, I don't know if you've met him. If not, you should speak to Ken, who I know you know well. They bought Van Adder's house. He
Okay,
used to be the editor and whatnot of Pro Trucker magazine and was very, very involved in big rig racing, which was a big thing throughout Alberta and BC and still is. But I know he's looking to get his fingers into something, so just a little word of whatever. And have you ever thought of doing something like that, or are we not big enough up there to do
you
that?
know, our big thing is volunteers.
Mhm.
I mean, we have I mean, another thing that's really getting big is dirt track racing, and we have right beside our airport, we can make a dirt track. But there's only so much of us, so many of us here. And everybody's still working. So it's a lot of time to organize it.
Well, I will mention it to John and his wife, because both of them are very involved.
Well, I'll go see them.
Yeah. That's where they live. In the afternoon, they usually.
But anyway. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
We'll
Thanks
have,
for going out.
we always wait. We'll have staff get into the owner owned park
Yeah.
situation and get you an answer.
Okay, that was the big thing, because that will bring a lot of cars here that people want to see.
Right.
You know, all the alcohol cars, the big stuff.
Okay.
Because they pull in big motorhomes or big trailers, and that's where they sit. And everywhere you go, whether it's Ashcroft or Penticton or Bishop, they're all there in the motorhomes, and that's just where they stay. They're not into camping, they're just into living there. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, we'll move to item 6.1. Somebody please move that the July 12th regular council meeting minutes be adopted as presented. Counselor Weed, second Counselor Leach. Before I call the question, any errors or omissions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Anyone on council wish to remove an item of those 5 pieces of 5 correspondence? Hearing none, somebody move that the correspondence included in the information report dated August 5th be received for information. Counselor Reed, second Counselor Howe. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Move to item 11.1. 2021-2022 municipal objectives Q2 progress report.
Probably used to it by now, every quarter. Hopefully you got a large prints of copy. Very lucky, it was very tiny. It's also available on our website. Yeah, so the one you have, I think, is quite cool. There's one by department as well internally within the package. Not a ton of progress been made in the last quarter. There's been some challenges with staffing, but we are staffed up now. So hopefully start to see some progress on things. Any department heads who wish to speak to any items are welcome to. To my own, one thing of note, the MOU with Coyote Creek Band, that's still in draft form, but we've kind of leapfrogged that and are now working on a draft of an MTSA. Actually, I've got an MTSA with the fire services and are now looking into an MTSA usually for water fluids. The MOU is still there, kind of in the back burner, but the relationship itself is almost beyond the MOU. We do still want to have one, the continuity and longevity of that relationship. Other items, some stuff just waiting on the province, obviously. And final item, cultural heritage master plan. Staff are looking into that. I've seen some example ones from other municipalities. The costs are significantly higher than I think anyone's down estimated to do that right. But at least we have some very good examples of how it can be done right. like many things in municipal government, we'll steal what others have done. Put our name on it.
Questions? Counselor Wade?
I don't have a question, but I see that Don Darling's on there. I read the water report from cover to cover, and I don't know how the rest of the public feels, but I felt that it was very well done, and the fact that there was notations within as to what the public of Lillooet expected, or what their perceptions were, or what they would like. And I just absolutely loved the end there where it prioritized, you know, what would be the most economical and most feasible to actually do to get more water here. And I just thought it was fantastic after all the years of water talks.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Okay, thank you. Someone to move that the 2021-22 municipal objectives Q2 progress report be received for information. Counselor Lee, second Counselor Reed. Call the question, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. We'll move to item 11.2, LRGC and Sturgeon Fishing Club.
Mr. Mayor, so this is the first question to council as to whether or not council has an appetite for staff, particularly me, entering into negotiations with the East Lillooet Rec Society in regards to potential for them to oversee access to and maintenance of grades to the boat launch, which is accessed through the municipal campground. So the boat launch historically has been a free-for-all, which has become ever more of a problem. I think during COVID, there was greater concern about visitors coming here, potentially during the outbreak of COVID, about that free-for-all nature of that access and its impact on the community as a whole. It actually gave an opportunity for staff and the voters on the water to have discussions with the municipality and our neighboring First Nations about how can we approach this collectively as a community to ensure that the voters, especially those out in town, are respectful of the river and respectful of the local businesses that depend upon that boat launch for their business. So that conversation's actually been ongoing now for years about what's the right balance of control and freedom, because it is a fantastic asset for the community for people to visit here. But I think maybe there's almost this feeling of the cabin fever and everyone wants to get out of town. So we're feeling that pressure more now than we did before pre-pandemic. Everyone wants to get on the water. In the meantime, there's people who are actually trying to sustain their livelihood through traditional fishing grounds. So finding that right balance is going to be a challenge. And in discussion with both the First Nations partners and voters, I think there's 30 of them at the last get together that had this a big circle outside their boat launch. Is that there's a strong desire, especially of the local operators and recreational users, to have more say over how that boat launch and surrounding area is governed by the community, by the users. So it was proposed at the last meeting that perhaps those voters, fish guides, go talk to the East Lillooet Rec Society to see if they would be amenable to forming one holistic group that could then have the insurance and governance to actually work with the district at the official level. Because right now the fishing groups, the voters are the unofficial club sort of. But East Lillooet Rec Society is an actual society with liability insurance and that. So they approached that society, they were receptive to it, they sent a letter which is attached to the report, saying that there were discussions with the district about co-management or some sort of agreement for that area. And staff are recommending that we at least entertain or enter into negotiations to see if we can find something that works for all parties. So that the funds we're collecting right now through our bylaw for the voting fees and parking fees, rather than just doing general revenue and being up to staff to figure out what's best for that place. But to actually have those funds either collected by us or by the society directly with the condition through the agreement that those funds be spent for improvements and maintenance of that boat launch area. So really good signage, grading of the launch itself, protection of the environment around it, garbage pickup, all those things. And in the meeting, a very preliminary meeting where the idea came out, the ideas were just flying out, 30-some people. And it became apparent to me that it would be very challenging for staff to try to figure out what the right balance is of what's the priority to them. So put the ball back in their court. So you as users need to figure out what the priorities are, bring them to us through a formal relationship to ensure that the funds being collected are being most efficiently spent on that asset. Staff are recommending that it's things tried now and come to a draft agreement. Staff would then bring that agreement back to council for consideration.
Any questions, comments from council? Councilor Weaver.
I think it's a great idea personally, because we do work better together and I know we have limited staff, and as long as we have controls, I'm okay with that. I have a question as to, you're saying East Lillooet Rec Society, paperwork says the Lillooet District Rod and Gun Club. Are they both the same or is one within one?
There's umbrellas within umbrellas. Yeah, so even this, the fisherman club would become a committee underneath the Lillooet District Rod and Gun Club. I believe is under the umbrella of East Lillooet Rec Society.
Okay, so the Rod and Gun Club would be specifically so that they're insured, so on and so forth, whatever. Okay, okay, got it.
I may have spoken to the wrong umbrella.
The East Lillooet Rec Society has control over the land,
Right,
all that.
thank you.
The land that the real big housing project will go. But I say that with the threat of being choked, so.
That might be the next council's decision. We
That's
won't
right.
know.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, through the mayor. Mr. Deniger, you had mentioned that right now it's more of a free for all as people become stir crazy at home and it's sunny and they want to get out on the water. And the guide companies, you had mentioned that they, like, I'm not understanding what, like, are they planning to somehow have more control over who gets to use the boat launch? Like, I'm just wondering how that comment weighs into.
Yeah, the final decision was still, in my mind, rest to be. Reasonable for those controls that we would want. But the idea is that the users themselves, the user group, which is the guides and the just recreational local users, would work amongst themselves as a committee under the Roger Rod and Gun Club to come up with their priorities and to come up with what they could see as a workable solution to manage that flow of traffic to and from the river and on the river. And what sort of education is required on site, or what prerequisites may be required of users. So they would figure out that balance and come back to the district with their proposal. Okay, so we need this sort of signage, we need this sort of sign off. Here's what we think are reasonable fees. Here's the sorts of certifications we would require of guides and so forth. And that would be then brought to us as a package deal to consider, rather than us trying to speak to 30 different local users and out of towners who may be only here for 24 to 48 hours. What works for you? We have to see it. But people are just coming into it constantly. So for district staff to try to get a handle on that is incredibly challenging, if not impossible. Whereas this user group, they know the river, they know the traffic, they know the challenges there. So they would be able to work out the logistics of it and bring it to the district. How to manage it, and then it would be an ongoing conversation. Okay, this is working. It's not working. Sort of what we're already doing right now in partnership with those we talk to in the user groups and with the campground operator. It is actually a dynamic exercise of trying to find that balance. But more of that work will be put on them up front to figure those things out, to bring it to us in a more picture.
Okay.
But the final say ultimately would be based on what the district agrees to in that agreement.
Okay, and then we talk about user fees. I'm just curious because, two things, right now we're collecting user fees. And those fees cover the cost of maintenance and upkeep. So the first question is, what are we planning to do with the fees that we currently have collected that are just sitting in our account? And two, has there been any, do we have any records of conversations regarding the fees for, as a way to create extra income for the community?
The fees, like fees for charges that we charge, whether it's getting the recreation pass or getting a building permit.
Mhm.
They're just one form of revenue that the district as a whole is collecting, so it's general revenue.
Mhm.
I don't believe to concur me wrong. I don't believe it's fees collected for the campground, boat and parking are specifically earmarked for something. I think the thinking at the time was it would help offset costs of maintenance of that area. But as the usage is increasing, there's wear and tear on it, both much is getting pretty rough. But so far it hasn't been spent on anything specifically for that improvement, and a lot of that's been waiting for the capital improvement project for the campground to take place, such as big new signage. Free parking. But so as that project comes to completion next year, the thought is instead of collecting these funds and trying to figure out, maintain, build, it's a good group to decide, well, no, we actually need to prioritize the launch and then prioritize parking. The amount of fees collected, I think are specified in here. About $2,000 collected so far this year. That is just general, same as, like I say, a record that's doesn't specifically come in for this and go out for that. But the proposal would be through this agreement, these funds would be directed back towards that asset. So that it doesn't simply get sucked into general revenue and gets spent on the pothole while the boat launch where the users are paying the fees continues to deteriorate.
The money that is currently collected, the 2,000, will that go to the organization or will that stay in our revenue because it was funded?
That would be part of the negotiations, what's the best way to handle the money and what kind of checks and balances council and staff are comfortable with, recommend the council feel comfortable with in terms of who should hold those funds to ensure that the obligations are being met by the other party. So if there's a confidence level there that they simply collect it and spend it and report on it, which is we do with some other relationships we have, then they may be the collector of the funds themselves. They may have a lockbox and the contact for voters that they simply pay directly to the society. If the society holds those funds under agreement with the district specifically for expenses related to vote launch. That's really part of the negotiations that will come back to council. It's the draft.
Yeah, so it's great to talk about that. You can see these and who's gonna hold money, and it's everyone's really eager when money is involved. But the other part of that, that I don't think it's been discussed yet tonight is the East Lillooet Rec Society or the Rod Gun Club also willing to take on the liability of the like terminology, but policing who's on the river, because there's already traditional fishing just started a couple of days ago, and there's already complaints from those voters. And so clearly the mechanisms that we have in place for the boat launch are being disrespected to a degree of what we've asked of the group. So that's my other concern, or point of note when you go into negotiation.
Yeah, I'm separately aware of those recent complaints. There's actually a dialogue just started as of this Monday about that, but this week. Those affected. the observation by those who are affected by these disrespectful voters instead of what is out of town dropping visitors who are just here for the day or two. So that's where that education and the peer pressure of the locals on these out of town visitors saying this is our river first, it's our right first, perspective. But those mechanisms of enforcement and peer pressure aren't there.
So maybe perhaps a monetary deposit that may or may not get returned at the end of the day if there's a complaint while they're on the river. It's something to be considered as well, because like I said, we share the area, we share resources, and there needs to be a balance. Especially if this is to go forward, I only see this getting bigger in the future. And I've been following what's happening down in Kelowna, and I don't think the district needs to be responsible for that if someone else is doing something that's holding this or taking care of it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, need someone to move that a draft agreement be negotiated with the Lillooet District Rod and Gun Club for operation and maintenance of the Lillooet boat launch, including collection and investment of user fees for the boat launch, and that the draft agreement be presented to council for consideration. Councilor Lee moves, Councilor Lee second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried, and thank you. Go to item 11.3, Squamish Lillooet Regional District Economic Development Service establishing bylaw number 1782-2022, electoral area B and district of Lillooet.
I won't say too much on this because I'm very much bringing forward something that has already come to council twice in one form or another. This is the first formal step of a long process. I just want to remind council this is the first step. What SLRD needs from council to carry out this first step to take it to the ministry, the province, is the consent of council on behalf of the electors of the district of Lillooet. That enables the SLRD to bring the proposal for the service area, this economic development service area, to the minister for their consideration. They could try motion, they could say okay to it. If it's okay by the ministry, then we'll come back through to the SLRD, and we'll then come back to area B and to this council for consideration then of how this service area, how this economic development service area will actually be implemented through a contractual agreement, through staffing, through whatever means. The bylaw itself is just simply to establish the service area. Bylaw should be attached as attachment number 3. Very short bylaw. Something of note is cost recovery. So I know that we're very confident here. Good. Some of the options for funding the service area for the economic development of culture in our area could be through taxation. It could be through other means as well. Fees and charges, could be revenue raised through other means, could be grants, could be private investment. So any number of means of actually funding the service, which could be established through that contract. And in conversation with the SLRD representative, they are strongly looking for the input of the municipality through that process of negotiating, determining how the service would be delivered. So what council has seen is the presentation from LAFS. It's looking to be the implementer of this service in our area. But ultimately, that decision is up to area director and municipality to decide that is the right approach and how council may or may not want to fund it. And this is that first step to get that process going. So have that discussion later about how. So staff are recommending that the process forward officially at this point, consenting to the plan.
Thank you. Councilor Weed, you are SLRD rep. Like to add?
Sure. I'll be reading because I've been writing on and off for a couple of days here about this, just a few different things I've heard. So a little bit of background here. Since 2018, either late 2018 or early 2019, whenever this council came into play and Area B Representative Vivian Bridge Jones. It was established the Northern Economic Development Initiative Committee. And when it was first established, Mayor Bussey was the representative from Lillooet and I was the alternate. And then ways down the way, I became the representative due to Mr. Bussey's busy schedule. And Councillor Hopwell became the alternate on that committee. And from the very beginning, agriculture was recognized as an economic driver for Lillooet. And there were many discussions as to how to move forward. This is just the forefront of how this bylaw came to be. It's not driven by the SLRD, but along with Area B, Lillooet, SLRD staff, and our staff, it was decided the most economical way to proceed would be to ask the province to approve an economic development service establishing bylaw. The bylaw itself does not commit the District of Lillooet, Area B, or any participants to a financial obligation or tax. It's the cost recovery and whatnot is all in the bylaw to be upfront and open. Because nobody wants to hear somewhere down the road, well, we didn't know about that, or we just heard about it yesterday. It's written in the bylaw that through a future contract or agreement, this would be a paid service, much like Camel's Foot Radio, Lillooet Search and Rescue, like Director Birch Jones already mentioned. The amount and how it's to be paid would be decided by future mayor and council. I very highly doubt it would come before this mayor and council before the end of term. So it would be and I'm thinking staff would get it on an agenda that late anyway. So it would definitely go before future mayor and council and whatever that agreement reached under the bylaw. So Lillooet and Area B representatives will decide what and if the services are delivered and direct finance staff on what to draft into a budget as far as an amount. I know there's figures in here. None of that has been signed, sealed, and delivered. So it's very convoluted and confusing. And then council would decide how to cover it, whether it be through a tax or whether it be through. I'm not a finance person, so I don't know. I don't think we can use gas tax money, but maybe recoverable funds, grants, whichever. Anyway, this also would all come back to the mayor and council of the day to vote on it before proceeding. So all we're voting on tonight is to approve the bylaw, send it on to the province where it may or may not be approved, and then bring it back to work on a contract. And another positive is anything agreed under this bylaw by future mayor and council, when voted on at the SLRD table, would only be voted on by the Area B director and the Lillooet director, would not include votes from Squamish, Whistler, Pemberton, Area A, C, and D, would just be those two directors voting on anything at the SLRD table in regards to this. So I don't know, I guess I'd like to say we would work better together. I've also seen it sitting at the SLRD table, how well Pemberton and the PBIS committee and everything moves forward. And we just seem to be stagnant. And this isn't something new. It's been being worked on for, like I say, 4 years, maybe 4 and a bit. So anyway, I just would really, and yes, on page 67 of the agenda is the cost recovery. So it's not necessarily going to be a tax. It's out there that it could be. But tonight we're not voting on amounts, people in the agreement, or how it's to be funded. We're just voting on getting the bylaw approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Any other questions or comments from the council? Councillor Howe?
Okay, through the mayor to administration, Mr. Dengar, you and I had a conversation about this. Because I reread this whole thing through twice and was left with, okay, what exactly is being proposed in this bylaw? So I had asked you, I said, I asked you two questions, a regional district. So what the request is that the regional district will tax our municipality residents. And two, the taxation that the SLRD would receive from the districts, the district residents as part of the service area. Those monies collected would go to fund less operational costs and wages. And those two questions were answered with yes. So I'm just wondering, is this also new information or was I understanding this correctly? I'm still left with, okay, so where do we land then? Is it actually, is this proposal really leaving everything still very open for the next council? Or is this still very much a taxation?
I mean, so typically a service area is funded through taxation. Most government services are funded through taxation or fees and charges. Just another way of taxing. So for example, the two examples of the search and rescue and the radio, those are similar service areas within the realm here, which is part of the SLRD. And they are funded through taxation and some other means as well. So tax isn't 100% what funds them. So under the bylaw here, the cost recovery taxes are the first things listed because that is what is typical. And that's what staff would typically expect us to fund these things with. There is the opportunity of trying to fund it through provincial grants, through fundraising, any other means that people can come up with, or to not fund it at all, or to fund it at varying levels. And so that funding level can be determined from that contract agreement, which area B the council gets say. So at first, yes, if there's a service area, the expectation is yes, you tax the pay for that service, whether it's search and rescue, agricultural, economic development, or anything. There is the opportunity to fund it through other means, and that is up to council to determine. The council could determine, so in terms of, is this open to the next council or whichever council is here when it comes back? Yes, absolutely, it's up to council whether or not to even participate. So the next elected council come 2023 could say, we're glad that it was brought forward. It seemed like a good idea. We're not happy with funding it in any way. We don't want to participate. Then the decision is, if you have a service area for snow action service being provided. Fall back on the remaining and for that service area to determine whether or not they're going to try to fund the whole thing or municipality as well, or don't fund part of it for their own.
What if,
I was gonna say, okay, so through experience, if a heap of work is put forward to establish something, often the idea to kibosh such efforts is not popular. So if we approve the movement forward of this bylaw, then we're essentially going to be we're requesting staff to put in a great deal of effort.
Yes and no. That most of the efforts actually get done by the SLRD at this point, quite a bit of effort. And that is why they came early to council through the previous meetings to find out was there an appetite for this at all, where they put the effort in. This is the stage where that chunk of work has been done. We all need to bring it down to the province to see if they're okay with it. And then it would come back to council in a draft form of an agreement. That agreement is going to take some work. I imagine it's going to be a collaboration between all the parties involved in it. And then council decides on it. But the only way I could see of having more certainty about what does that agreement look like? What does that service look like? Where is the accountability and the reporting of that service? Because that's what I can worry about when I hear about a new service is, well, how do we know they're actually going to just saying, if we're putting in X number of dollars into the service, what are we getting out of it? Is it an investment or is it just some costs? So that accountability has to be fleshed out in the contract. But that's a lot more work to do. So if we were to draft that agreement first before going through this process, we would have actually done a lot more work to potentially get a no. council. and everything.
So
So it's work either way, but it's less work to do it in this order. And to then go, okay, now we're gonna try and work out the nitty gritty.
So if, maybe, okay, so if there are other options of the district working with the SLRD or with LAFs directly in terms of an MOU or like we have, like replacing, we're putting in place the chamber, or any other funding like we have with the Historical Society or the museum, or sorry, the Miyazaki House. Would we need a service area bylaw? Like, would that
No.
be as important, or is this more so that taxation is an option?
So the taxation is an option, and so that there is an overarching structured relationship between Area B and municipality in how that third party potentially allows was implemented under one agreement, rather than them having two agreements with two different government agencies to try to deliver something holistically, where there's that uncertainty between the stability of those two relationships, like versus something established in law. This is a service, we all agree to it under one agreement, and this is a certain guarantee to that organization for funding, but also that expectation of them, how they report back to us.
Okay, so I'm gonna step off and let the other counselors speak,
Go
but
for it.
I am gonna raise two concerns. One is around LAF as an organization and how we've responded to other organizational funding requests in the past, especially most recently. And every organization is important to this community. So, the concept of taxation to aid one organization is like saying, we think you're more important than these. Also, my concern is a floodgate that will be opened the minute we allow for this, because we were just in conversations with the Historical Society around the $22,000, and those monies created a huge amount of conflict. What, you know, in understanding of delegation, what are they for? What are they used for? Does the district get to hold that? There was plans put in place. People were hired based on an expectation of those monies. If we allow for one organization, if we go through the process of a service area for one organization, what's to say we're not going to do that for other organizations? When do we stop? I feel like council is becoming trigger happy with this concept of applying additional taxes to our residents, AKA the pool conversation just recently. We should apply a new tax or a new parcel tax to be able to put forward to the pool. But our residents, Canadians are already, and I'll speak to this broadly because it is broad. We are so strapped right now. We're coming out of COVID, where this is a time of economic upset. We had no idea how the economy is going to end up in a year from now. We're talking about farmers worldwide having issues, which yes, could be a reason why we'd want to work the cost of glass into our taxation, but residents are strapped. They do not have many trees. It is not an endless growth of finances for them. At some point, we need to say, when do we stop the additional taxes? When do we stop thinking that this is a go-to option without exhausting every other option? I don't know why we have to, I think we should take taxation off the list. LAFs as an organization, why are we not expecting them to be able to fund their own operational costs and wages, but we expect the chamber to do it, or we expect the Historical Society to do it, or we expect the museum to do it, or the Miyazaki House to do it? Why is this different? Okay.
Before I go, staff want to reply to that? It was directed to
Yeah,
staff.
I
that's
think
all
that
I'm
was the
saying.
question, yeah. I would say that one, right off the bat, the municipality can provide, or any local government can provide any service it wants. We want to have, like I said this before, council wants to provide hot air balloon rockets. Council has that right. Council can do any service it wants
Mhm.
that exceeds benefits the community. So the decision then comes down to whatever revenue we collect through whatever means, fees, charges, other things. What services are an investment versus just an expense? So there's many very valuable community groups. But I hope the council considers when each one of these groups comes to it, talking about, can we enter into an agreement with the municipality to get some funding? Is for council to consider, for every dollar we put in, what are we getting out of it? How is it helping the economy, or how is it helping people in a way that if we tried to do it ourselves with our own staff, it costs them more? So I know in conversation with Melanie Homer at the SLFD, this focus of this has been very much on the economic development aspect of agriculture. It's actually under that section of legislation. It's not just any old service. It's an economic development service focused on agriculture. We know there's some big barriers right now for agriculture and storage, transportation, and so on. And that's the last thing we're going to do. So for council's consideration, somewhat now, but more when it comes back, if it gets to that stage, is what level of investment through whatever means of funding gives us more in return. We put in $24 per average household. Are we going to get $34 of output in economic development in our region, so that those taxes are actually now being spread across all these new residents who are moving here because they now have jobs in agriculture which didn't exist before. And that's where the important factor of that agreement comes in, for the accountability and deliverables have to be really crystal clear, that we can hold that service provider, should it be less, to account for actually proving out that what's being spent on it is delivered. And that's where it fell down, I would say, with both Miyazaki House and the Historical Society, is that I think we all feel inside that they're doing good things for our community and that they are very helpful to economic development, tourism especially. We see how many buses and visitors come to these two locations, but we don't have the clarity and accountability. What are your numbers? What impact are these visitors stopping at the museum, the visitor center, and the Zacchaeus? What impact are they having in dollars on our local economy? And that's what staff need to work out now with them, is the statistics. What empirically is the evidence that the money we're giving them, $20,000 a year, is actually resulting in $40,000, $50,000, $80,000 of new economic activity because they're so supportive of tourism businesses. So that's what I hope council is considering when it looks at one community group asking for funding versus another one, which may only benefit a small handful of community users who may not have economic output to what they do. They're helping people. How is that they actually help pay back to them?
Councilor Page.
A lot of notes on this, but I'm gonna try and keep it short. So one thing the Council House said is an agreement with LAS. This is not an agreement with LAS. This is a government to government agreement. A LAS was used as an example at the past two meetings of how the investment of a potential investment that is really up in the air at this point, because there's nothing in it that says we do or do not, could benefit. Area Director George Jones gave examples of how much money she used from her discretionary fund and what was given back to not only Area B, but also the community of Lillooet. And I don't think that there's even more programs that I don't think was probably even considered. I think they were, her and the executive director at the time, were speaking to grant funding that they got in, but you start talking about the couponing program that was applied for by funds because she funded that executive director to write that grant. So the flush out the benefit, it's hard until you're in it to measure, but she was giving us solid examples of the potential. I think we need to take that into consideration, as well as being able to fund it from a discretionary fund from the SOD for the last, I think, was it 7 years? The one measurable we do have is how the organization, being LAS, how far they've come, and we look at the successes that we've had in agriculture, And this is just like this little tiny door that's being opened. And historically, if we go back into Lillooet's history, back 100 years, like agriculture was very big here and it was lost. And I remember sitting in a strategic planning meeting with this council when we were brand new in 2008. And the question was specifically brought up by you, Councillor Howe. How do we get economy here? How do we get industry here? How do we create this? How? Through, we can't go and tell somebody to go into business or convince them to, but through policy, like this bylaw, this is the starting point. So I would hope that you would take that into consideration. I hope the chamber takes that into consideration. And I hope that the chamber can also go back to the last two meetings, which I know that Jeff Johannes was there for, and to maybe review the video on that and get some clarification of what information you're bringing to the chamber, because there's a lot there that you said that I don't think fully matches what's in here. And I'm sorry, I'm not a writer, I get it.
Your remarks are to council.
Sorry,
Whatever.
I know.
Yeah.
A little passionate, sorry.
Okay, wait, before I let you go, I'm gonna go ahead. But, while I'm really buoyed and positive and excited about agriculture, I firmly believe I've essentially experienced this over the past few years while I was on council, that it is what our branding should change to. I firmly believe that we can grow food. I've met a number of people and just listening to them and the work that they do. I really feel strongly that this is the route that we should take, and I think it would benefit us on all aspects if food security, agriculture is prime and it's our brand. However, when I look at this bylaw, item 5 says under cost recovery, providing the service shall be recovered by. It doesn't give any other opportunity in terms of may be recovered by, it shall be. Property value taxes imposed in the court, blah, 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 blah. I'm not comfortable with that. It's the end of my term, and I will not go out voting for an obligation for our residents to become taxed at this stage of the game. It should be something that's considered during our financial review once a year. Again, I'm 100% behind this, but I'm nervous about this, and I've got 2 meetings left. I am not going to vote for a tax increase for our residents. Am I wrong in this?
Melanie Hummer is on the line if you want to ask her about options or.
No, I'm just saying, look, we are asked to do 1782-2022. Cost recovery, 5, as provided for in section 378 of the local government, the annual cost of providing the service shall be recovered by 8, property value tax imposed. To me, that's no wriggle room. That's telling us this is what's going to happen. That's what makes me a bit uncomfortable. Given that, I want to see this whole thing go ahead, but really, guys, you know, a 4-year term, I got 2 months left, and you want me to obligate the taxpayers of this community at this late stage? No, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm really not.
Okay, then, what I would say that is a quotation out of the Local Government Act, and it is a list of options, of 5 options there. So yes, it has to be funded through one of those 5 options or a combination of those options. But the decision of which option or combination of options used is up to council at the time that it decides whether or not to move forward with that service. So if council at the time does not want to impose a tax, it could look at the, I believe, the bottom 3 options for fees and charges to the users.
I'm happy to hear that, and I would vote for that, but the wording doesn't reflect that. It does not reflect that. And I'm gone in 3 months, and this thing will go, no, I'm telling you, either we fix the wording, because I agree with your interpretation of it, I think that's great, and we can move the whole process forward. I'm uncomfortable with that word, I really am.
I was going to suggest that perhaps a conversation with Melanie.
Well, the point is, if you say, staff says that, you know, move the motion as read or refer staff to other options. But again, I'm just one vote, but I'm telling you or indicating to you where my vote is going based on the wording of that file.
Can I call Melanie to speak to it?
Yeah.
If she's available online. Ms. Elmer, are you available?
Yes, I am. Your worship, I'd be happy to speak to this. I'll try turning my camera on. If there is difficulty with the audio, I'll turn it back off. Thank you for the question. The wording of shall be recovered is the standard wording that's required in service establishment bylaws. We have a number of existing service establishment bylaws, the regional parks for all 4 electoral areas combined being one of them, that are currently having their tax rates set at 0. So coming back to the earlier conversation, it's true that it's not determined whether or not there will be taxes. Taxes is typically one of the principal sources for funding service areas, but it is not a requirement. And if there is a desire, the service level for that service can be set as high or at no service level. This really provides a framework. If we don't have a service establishment bylaw at a regional district, we can't do anything. We're not like a municipality where the board can simply make decisions and act things out. We have to have all these silos, which of course, I think most of you are aware of that, but that's just how we function at regional districts, that we have to have these little silos for every separate service because of our accountability to the people in that service area, as opposed to the regional district as a whole. So that piece of wording there is just the standard wording that's in all of the service establishment bylaws, and it doesn't obligate the District of Lillooet and Area B to paying taxes unless at a future point it's determined that that's what they would like to see happen. And the service level can be as high, as low, or non-existent. Like I said, some of them are set at 0 now. So having that wording is just how we're required to build our service establishment bylaws, but it does not require and tie the hands of the District of Lillooet. What happens is through the budget process, the participants in a service determine what they want delivered and how they want it delivered, and then the sources of funding come out of that discussion as to what's required in order to meet what it is that you want. And we have that same discussion that you have around your table, I'm sure, about what are our expectations and how are we going to fund this and what's the alignment between those two. And as your CAO has pointed out, what's our return on what we decide to allocate to any particular service. So that wording is not palatable, but it's really something that it's how we have to build our service establishments at regional districts, not having the same level of flexibility that you have as a municipality. Hopefully that's answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still not comfortable. It means I'm required to trust provincial government or some part of the act. I'm still uncomfortable. I just can't understand why the wording can't be left so that it's not a nebulous, but at least understood. I'm uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable. Councillor Leach.
Understandable. I understand where you're coming from. However, and I just want to clarify with staff that if this were to be voted on and it's tied up and it fails and it's tied, the legal requirements and the legislation is that it can be brought back or it cannot be brought back.
So if this fails right now, what is the option to potentially bring it back in the future?
Yeah, through his worship. It can't go anywhere for at least 6 months. And typically, if a bylaw is rejected by one of the participating areas, it's going to be a green light, green light. If one of them is a red, the whole thing fails. That means there's no service for any of the area. And then if it were to be brought back at a future point, the inspector of municipalities is going to be applying a much higher level of scrutiny to anything that's put forward and to whether it would be considered for approval to ensure that it really does have electorate approval. So for example, it might need to go out to a referendum or an alternate approval process to determine the will of the electorate, which would attract additional costs associated with that process. Or there could be other things that would need to be changed to indicate that there's been further
Your audio's cutting out. We want to switch.
of a high enough level from both participating areas for this to be a successful service.
Do you need that again?
No, like I said, the point is that basing this whole thing, and my vote would go on somebody's word, not on anything written. Certainly not with the way that this bylaw is presented. Damn. And the thing is, I mean, the crowning glory is to bring it forward to us at the end of our term. Rather than bringing it up when it's a budget time. We've got competing interests. We've got a public works that needs more staff. We've got so many other competing interests. I want this to happen. I really feel that food security and agriculture is our brand going forward. Damn it. Really? I'm supposed to vote and just trust everybody, including the province?
If I may suggest two things, then one option is to simply defer this, to not approve it or deny it, but simply defer this decision. I don't know how.
Yeah, I would hate to, I'd like to hear those options because I don't know where the rest are voting, but I have a pretty good idea.
So
I don't want to see this thing fall off the face of the earth. I want to see it going, but I'll be down 2 months in my term and I'm gonna ding the taxpayers? Nah.
fair enough. So one option without completely killing it is to defer the decision. Leave it for a later council. Melanie, correct me if that's a problem or not. Number two is, Melanie, if you could provide maybe more clarity from a legislative standpoint or a process standpoint. When is the decision made by this council whether or not that this will be funded through taxation?
Yeah, so in terms of deferral, there is wording in the legislation that the municipal council is supposed to provide a response to the regional district within 30 days, or else the regional district can seek participating area approval directly rather than going through the mayor and council. I'm not sure if the SLRD would exercise that option, but that is where it would go because there's an obligation to provide a response within 30 days of having requested that response. There is, sorry, what was the second part?
At what point under law does this council decide whether or not the fees for this are collected through taxation versus some other means of funding?
So the bylaw gives the framework that permits taxation, but the actual exercising of the taxation comes through the annual budget process.
I wasn't watching who's next. Councilor Weeding.
Okay, through the mayor, Director Helmer, it would only go through the budget process if there was a signed agreement. Is that not right?
No, the decision to even enter into an agreement would still need to be taken. So that contract discussion would occur, but in order for there to be funding, one of the options that could be looked at would be taxation, if there was a desire to proceed with that, as well as the other funding sources that were identified. One of your staff members was actually flagging and asking about the wording that concerned his worship about the shell, as to whether the SLRD board would consider may instead. And then it would leave the option open. I would, that's something that we could bring back to both municipal affairs and the SLRD board to see if they would be willing to rescind and reissue third reading. And then it would come back to the District of Lillooet Mayor and Council again for further consideration, but with that one word changed. So that's something that was put to me that I would be willing to investigate if that would be something more of interest to the District of Lillooet. Thank you.
Thank you.
But my question was, I know what the bylaw says and I understand it and I don't have a problem with it, but as to, I also understand that as to how it would be funded would go to the budget process, but an agreement would have to be in place between LAPS, Area B, and the District of Lillooet before that time, would it not? Before the budget process?
Before any money would be spent, there would have to be an agreement that would have to meet the requirements of the participants and meet with the approval of the SLRD, or there wouldn't be any money spent, that's for sure.
And that would come before the not the presiding mayor and council, whatever mayor and council has their fannies in the seats.
That would be correct, and I would speculate based on the approval times of the province right now that that probably would be the incoming mayor and council.
Right, so we aren't committing them to a tax, is what I'm saying. We aren't committing a new mayor and council to a parcel tax or a tax or any kind of agreement with LAPS or Area B or any, we aren't committing the next council to anything, are we?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I'll bite my tongue, but I was gonna say that, why are we doing this? Right, wait, Councillor Leach, you had your hand up, and then I'll go to Councillor Howe.
The only thing I was gonna say is that if this gets killed because of a 2-2 vote, that makes me way more uncomfortable than one word in the entire document.
Okay, I take your point. All you're doing is entrenching me more, just so that you know that. Councillor Howe?
I feel like this is being forced upon us. It's been 4 years in the making, as I've just found out. Okay, we heard about it, what, 2 council meetings ago? So we've been told that it's up and coming twice over 4 years. As far as I recall, the idea of a service area, it was never proposed that in order to have a service area, there will be a taxation. Yes, services are, if you have a service area, then taxation is an option. Why haven't we talked about other options first? Like, if the amount of effort and work that went into this, I don't know why we haven't heard more about this coming up. So we don't have to try to figure this out in one meeting and vote yes or no on this. I'm deeply uncomfortable with this. Second, the fact that in order to have a service area, there will be taxation, whether it's placed at 0 or not, tells me it's a moving scale. So pending the operational costs and whether or not they go up or wage increases, that then, because I'm feeling this pressure and it's happened before, because this is politics and this is how this process rolls. I don't want the next council to feel like, well, you know what, we've got the service areas in place now. They've been working for 4 years on this, and now all these reasons why they should be pressured, not pressured into a vote to allow for this. It makes me uneasy. Why on earth, like, if the SLRD has been funding all of these opportunities, why can't the district, as the district, look at how we can help fund? I don't understand why we haven't had those conversations yet. Why aren't we entering into MOUs? Why hasn't that topic come onto the table? I am, you know, a 2-2 vote or not, I would be voting against it just on pure principle that I don't want taxation as a conversation for a new council to have to go into because they feel somewhat pressured to do so.
But look, if I could say, it isn't, our concern shouldn't be in terms of the council or how, if we can make this work, that's worth discussion. We have before us this resolution and we have before us, and that's what we got to concentrate on. Can we make it work? Can it be salvaged, or we go ahead and decide on our own individual votes? So like I say, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but we're dealing with this now. And if we can salvage it, great, because I think it's most important. But I'm honest and I'm uncomfortable and I remain uncomfortable.
Am I missing something with the service area? Like what exactly are the pros for service area versus the district entering into some kind of agreement to support labs? I feel like I'm missing a chunk of data there.
But Ms. Helmer may be better to answer that specific question. You had an earlier question about why hasn't the district entertained the idea of entering into an agreement directly with labs. I would say that if I were approached as staff representative of the district from any user group in the community or region to enter into such agreement, my first response would be to go back to policy. Policy says the district does not provide granted aid to third parties. The agreements that exist with Miyazaki and Historical Society are actually anomalous and don't fit policy. Those have been rolled into operating costs. But in most municipalities, those would actually be ongoing grants and aid, and that's very much how the agreements are worded right now. Very much how they're handled, they are grant and aids, raise service. So at the last council meeting, obviously from council direction, try to work that into a proper service agreement. But you know, if labs came to me sometime this year and said we want to get funding from the district, I would say policy says no, it would die there. They would then have to try and petition council directly at the having the same conversation about why this group and not another group. That's where other municipalities have full-blown frameworks set up on how they do grants and aid evaluations of groups, much as you do evaluations of tax exemptions. Why this group, not that group, why 100% versus 50% tax. So, but the service area through a regional district is a legislative agreement. And it is intended to be in partnership with other members of the regional district. So they can sell them to student council that specifically.
Okay, I recall conversations about asking for that framework for service agreements to figure out who would be deserving of these funds. And that never came to us. And I agree, that would be helpful. Where I take issue with this piece of legislation is in the taxation component. They can set the taxation at 0, but it's still a moving scale. So I have questions around like who exactly is collecting the taxes, and if LAPS is the only organization that has access to the service area agreement taxation income. So does that mean that the Chamber of Commerce can go?
So Councillor Howard, it states in there, it doesn't have to be LAPS, it can be Chamber of Commerce, it could be anyone that an agreement is done.
So it's a tax
So-
rate.
So the tax rate is done by the SLRD.
Yeah, bingo. So I'm really uncomfortable with this.
Is there a way in which we can salvage this? It appears we've got a 2-2 vote sitting in front of us here. I really want to salvage this. I think it's important. And again, I keep repeating myself. I'm not comfortable with the words. So Councillor Weed, you want to say something?
I don't know how else to salvage it, other than it's been said over and over and over several times, regardless of one word in the policy, which is legislative wording, that there would be no, the mayor and council of the day will set how it's funded, who it's funded, who signs the agreement or who the agreement is with. So all we're doing is putting forth the service agreement bylaw. We're not deciding to go into an agreement with LAFS, the chamber,
That's right.
or anybody, and we aren't deciding on a taxation. And I disagree that we're setting up a new mayor and council to feel obligated. They will have that choice, and just like we did in our first term, second term, first year, second year, fourth year,
Well,
at budget time, how it will be funded, if it will be funded. I mean, there's always that
thank you,
option.
Counselor
too.
Weed, then show me in this resolution, this bylaw where it states that. It doesn't. That's where I struggle. I interrupted.
I
Counselor
think it
Weed.
does when it says that we need to enter into a contract or agreement. Right there. Otherwise, the bylaw just sits there. If there's no contract and no agreement, and mayor and council of the day haven't decided to enter into a contract or an agreement with Area B and a participant, then it doesn't happen. If they decide to fund it through a grant, then that's what happens. It's all there. I don't know what the perception about one word is. Because the commitment still will come back onto mayor and council, not the bylaw.
Look at under number 2, service being established, the regional board may enter, doesn't have to. Item 5, cost recovery. The service shall be recovered by. You're asking me to trust the province.
No, I'm asking you
I've
to
been
trust,
on the block.
I am asking you to trust the mayor and council of the day when it comes down to the vote on the budget, because you won't be there. I may or may not be there. We don't know who will be sitting at this table. And just like the rest of the constituents in this town, they put their trust in the mayor and council of the day to make the right decisions for the community. And I think that's where you need to put your trust, not in the province, not in the SLRD, not in me.
Thank you, Councillor Howell.
If we're to put trust in this table then, and I'm to vote on this right now, my vote is no. So let's talk about that for a moment, because I don't want to, I don't, this is the crux of it. I don't feel like I have wrapped my head around this enough to be able to vote either way. I don't want to do it a disservice, but I also don't want this moving forward with how I understand it now. So is there a way to put this on pause or defer as the mayor has suggested? Or do we have to kibosh this now? Like, not, is this where I have to vote? No, I don't want to do that. But I don't want to push this decision onto the next new council either, because I do trust my vote and I am at the table right now and I'm deeply unsatisfied with this. As a taxation as an option, I am not for. Is there a way to do this without taxation as an option? Is that an option?
My understanding, and Ms. Helmer can correct me if I'm wrong, the wording of this is standard and it does list 5 options for funding it, including zero funding, zero tax rate. It will be up to the process of involvement of the future council sitting here to decide whether or not they want to have this service. Just as if in future, the council at this table decided they no longer wanted to fund search and rescue, funding for that would be cut to zero in the District of Little Wet. It would be funded through the remaining regions, and the service would be affected by that funding decision. But it's an annual decision. If this process is killed right now, from what I understood from what Ms. Helmer said, SLRD could go directly to the electorate, but is unlikely to do so. It could go back and ask for a wording change, but I'm getting the feeling that's probably not going to make a difference at this table. More about the fundamentals of the taxation being an option at all. My understanding is that it has to be an option. So it would probably kill the process for at least a year.
Before you go, I've changed my mind in light of what the CAO just said. That the tax, property value tax imposed can be 0%. And it better be 0% from the sense that that option is noted to me, so I'm comfortable with my vote. Okay, yes, Councillor Lee.
I just want to add something because I heard some discretion in conversation tonight about that, you know, this has been 2 years in the making. This has not just been 2 years in the making. I was at the inaugural meeting when LAFS pulled a group of volunteers in this very room to see what they could do and form. I sat right where Barb is sitting, and this room was packed. There was people standing out in the hallway. So as electoral representatives of this community, I can tell you that this has been going on. So I believe, and I might have my years wrong because it was so long ago, that inaugural meeting was either 2015, 16, or 2014. All right, thank you. It's been a long time. And then also the former SLRD Area B rep, Nikki Macri, had this on his agenda for years. This is not a new concept supporting agriculture. It's just that we finally gotten to a point in both organizations where we have the capacity to go, well, not even both organizations, in general, in this community, we've gotten to a point where we can start moving forward in a manner that we can all agree with for the most part. I understand that you may feel uncomfortable, but as a whole for this community, I honestly, from what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've read, and all of the years that I have paid attention to the agriculture and SLRD talk, that this is something that this region wants. And
You are in agreement with that, Councillor Leach. It's a matter of how we get there. You got the votes, so let's move on. Right. Yes,
I'd like to make note.
last comment.
Yes, sir. If we vote this down, it goes to the electorate. So that allows for Councillor Leach to see, and for the rest of us to see what the electorate actually feels about this process of having a tax levy, a tax place as an option. I think, you know, I'm more comfortable with that than voting for yes. Leave it up. And if the community actually really does want this, as Councillor Leach has suggested, then it'll show.
Thank you. Councillor Weed.
It won't necessarily go to the electorate. I think Director Helmer said it may go to the electorate, to the electorate, but the SLRD probably wouldn't go that route because to do a referendum is very costly. This was the most cost efficient way to get something on the table and move the bylaws forward. So I think it's just enough conversation, maybe there, just call the question.
That's what I intend to do. Thank you. All
You're
right.
welcome.
Someone moved that council give participating area approval by consenting on behalf of the electors of the District of Lillooet to the adoption by the Squamish Lillooet Regional District of proposed SLRD bylaw number 1782-2022, cited as the Squamish Lillooet Regional District Economic Development Service establishing bylaw number 1782-2022 electoral area B and District of Lillooet. Who moved? Councillor Lee, second, Councillor Weed. Any further discussion, please? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. Move to item 12. East Lillooet Rec Society Motorsports Track.
You all set that up, so I didn't have to follow that, right?
You got them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is that 22-003 is the file number? is the file number assigned to the district-sponsored amendment to zoning bylaw 2018, number 454, for consideration of the motocross facility at the East Lillooet Rec Society Crown Lease property, legally described as District Lot 1295, Lillooet District, except the west half of the west half and the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter, and the part described in CG 290949F, subject of Crown Lease 348818. And I said that out loud now, so no one has to attempt it later. At the July 12th meeting, staff were directed to look into possibilities for allowing motocross to be permitted within the existing policy framework. I did that and it can't. My direction was to report back to the mayor, and we agreed that based on council discussion at the July 12th meeting, the obvious desire to see some way to yes, staff would draft an amending bylaw for council's consideration for a motocross track at this site. This will allow council to consider first and second reading today, and if they give these readings, proceed to public hearing and potential adoption on September 6th. Bylaw 2022-014 is proposing to add a site-specific use to a portion of the property for use as a motocross track. However, before council debates the bylaw, I would ask that they consider just how broad you'd like to see this use. Staff have presented two possible definitions to add to the bylaw that would permit this. The more restrictive being motocross track, which means the use of the land for a constructed off-road circuit used for motorcycle riding racing. The broader definition being motorsports facility, which means land, buildings, or structures used for the purpose of racing automobiles, motorcycles, go-karts, and other motorized vehicles, and other uses accessory to motor vehicle racing. The definition of motocross track is fairly self-explanatory, tiny humans on fancy lawnmowers. Staff representing motorsports facilities as a way of considering additional uses or special events that the Rec Society may want to hold there without having to seek additional council approval. It is my understanding that this site did used to host stock car races, and this definition would open that up as a possibility in the future. We've also included noise restrictions in the bylaw, which mirrors the nuisance bylaw hours for construction, being quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., except for Saturday night, which is 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. If council does go to public hearing, the district will need to absorb the cost of notification signs being installed on the property, mailing out notification letters to all properties within the notification buffer area, and taking out 2 advertisements in the Bridge River Lillooet News. These costs are normally covered by an application fee, which is not applicable for this amended bylaw. Staff asked that council pick a definition that they would like included in the bylaw as the first resolution before moving on to debate as to whether or not to give first and second reading to the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any questions, comments from council? Any name suggestions? Councilor Lee?
I think that it should not be restricted to a motorsports facility.
Think it shouldn't be or should?
No idea, should be motorsports facility.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Weed.
I agree with that. I'm thinking go-karts and, yeah, I agree with that.
Yes.
Motorsports facility, ready.
Okay. Seeing none, any questions for clarification for Mr. Taylor on this recommendation? Done. I will read it, no, as it is written. Who will move? Councillor Leach, second. Councillor Weed. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your effort. Item 12.2.
Mr. Mayor, my apologies. There is a second motion to give first and second reading to the bylaw and schedule the public hearing.
Wasn't that covered in the way it was written at first?
We need these two as separate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That takes care of item 1 under the recommendation for item 2. Someone moved the District of Lillooet zoning bylaw 218, number 454, amending bylaw number 2022-014 be introduced and read a first and second time, and that a public hearing be scheduled. And further, that staff give notice of the public hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. Who moved? Councillor Weed, second Councillor Leach. Any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 12.2, camera inspection and PPR.
Mr. Mayor. So this report is a request for, words and numbers you were saying earlier, no? This report is a request for decision to purchase 2 pieces of equipment to begin and continue conducting preventative maintenance in our underground infrastructure. The first piece of equipment is staff recommends purchasing is to replace a current sewer camera equipment that, as of this council meeting, has actually finally retired and no longer works. Because in here it was saying that it's on its way out and is left the building. It's been quoted at $44,320 to be funded out of the vehicle equipment replacement reserves. Sewer camera equipment is vital in providing information that can be recorded and used for preventative maintenance, inspections, can be used for insurance purposes, and making decisions about sewer infrastructure upgrades. The second piece of equipment that staff recommends purchasing is the ground penetrating radar, quoted at $25,000 to be funded out of the vehicle equipment and replacement reserves, to assist in creating more accurate database for utilities located underground. To better plan for future upgrades or repairs, 7th Avenue storm drains, locate services for new subdivisions and developments, even detecting leaks. Ground penetrating radar can help to determine the depth, direction, and distance of utilities underground prior to excavations. So staff is recommending the purchase of the sewer inspection and ground penetrating radar.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council? Other than the fact I thought we already had these things. No. Yes, Councillor Weed.
I'm just curious if, as the new public works director, does the district have any equipment that isn't on its way out? I'm thinking that nothing's been maintained or replaced or whatever for a lot of years.
Now, one new truck.
Yeah. I just expected these things to come.
Okay. Thank you. Someone to move that staff be authorized to purchase sewer pipe camera inspection equipment in the amount of $44,320. And the cost of this purchase be paid out of vehicle and equipment replacement reserve. Who moves? Councillor Weed, second Councillor Howe. Any further comments, questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Someone move that staff be authorized to purchase ground penetrating radar equipment in the amount of $25,000. And the cost of this purchase be paid for out of vehicle and equipment replacement reserves. Moves. Weed, Councillor Weed, second Councillor Leach. Any further comments, questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 13, work in progress. August 5th, had a chance to look at that. Any questions or comments from council to staff? Seeing none, someone move that the work in progress as of August 5th, 2022 be received for information. Councillor Howe, second Councillor Leach. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. You. No. Go report from the mayor. One item in that whole period, believe it or not, on August the 3rd, Interior Health Authority held the mayors and regional district chairs roundtable. Some interesting things. I took notes and I'm going to share them with you. The shortage of staff, what we've learned at that meeting, the shortage of staff across BC as well as the rest of Canada. No easy answers. They're looking at childcare and a number of different things. New provincial policies as well as federal for recruitment of staff is being worked on. In July, 130 open positions, but they filled 95%. This is the Interior Health Authority I'm talking about. They're the one to look at new creative ways to work with physicians and staff. They're constrained by agreements, which are slow to change. The COVID pandemic impact on healthcare has been extraordinary. They did get some additional funding for the Royal Inland Hospital and with their meeting with the health ministry. They are a main concern at the present time, or as of that date, was the struggle with laboratory services and the shortages in that area. They're looking at new job descriptions, and Interior Health Authority is leading the rest of the province in lab and kinesiology. Communications Department is stressed. They have a number of vacancies and they're looking to restructure. Important note, which I found good, but I will be capitalizing. If we have ideas, share and give candid feedback. Good, okay. The statistic that they wanted to make mention is in 2019, there was 4.7% vacancies. Today, there are 13.6%. They're recognizing they're getting a lot of negative press. And they're forced by policy. Oh, this is the thing. The question came up from one of the mayors in terms of staff that was removed because of lack of vaccinations. And reply was they're forced policy by the province and they will not change. Asked how many, 800 staff were removed. And the reply was in order to protect the public. They don't see any change in the future. They're seeing transmissibility, lots of people in hospital with COVID, so they're not letting their guard down. Regarding COVID vaccines, the question was asked, are you looking at mandates? Are you looking at what? And essentially the reply was to do self-risk assessments. They don't have a lot of science one way or another. So I found that interesting and I share that with you. Okay, Councillor Howe, please.
I have nothing to report. There was a meeting for the Indigenous Court Steering Committee, which I received word on. Sadly, it fell on the day that I'd be on the road, so I wasn't able to attend. Have reconnected with the Chamber of Commerce, who are now going to be having conversations around best use of liaison. So that's good to hear that that conversation is coming up, especially as the council comes in and strategizing for that role. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Leach.
I apologize for coughing earlier. July 12th, I did get my home fire smart assessment. So I think Sharon from the fire assessment came around my yard and my house, and she made recommendations on what we can do better. I learned that my house and yard is in the extreme, mostly because we have a lot of vegetation around and also a wood deck. But anyway, some tips as well came through her. If we were to evacuate, things that we could do to lessen chance of catching fire. So that was really interesting, and I know there's still going to be an email follow-up, which I haven't received yet. July 27th, there was two some UBCM local government modernizing policing roundtables this month. I was able to attend one of them. The other one I did have to work. So the one I attended, we reviewed recommendations 7 and 8 of the special report. And I just wanted to let council know, for those that are attending UBCM, there is a plenary session on the special report that you can register for. I am registered for it. I just sit in the background and see what we talked about, how it gets communicated on to the rest of the electorate. And on July 28th, I had a Zoom call with the CN representative, Tyler Bannock, which I know Mayor Bussey has spoken to, the manager of Public and Government Affairs for Alberta and Northwest Territories. And part of that was to touch base, get contact and get some communication going on behalf of the Wildfire Preparedness Roundtable that I participated in. And we got that connection going. And I know that there's some communications going back and forth between Fraser Basin fellow Mike Simpson, who was the facilitator, sorry, lost the word, for the roundtable. So that's really good, as well as, because I had said to him, I said, well, being in a railway family, I understand that there is fire mitigation and there's things that the employees have to follow. I said, the public doesn't know that, governments don't know that, nations don't know that. So anyway, they were actually, after the Lytton fire, they had to go back, the drawing board, and Transport Canada did actually require them to reassess their plan. And so they have out, and it is available online for anyone to read. It's the CN Extreme Weather and Fire Risk Mitigation Plan. It's a 24-page document. And it's very specific on what can and cannot be done. Also he made note is if there is any issues, the CN police line is the CN police line, if there's any issues, like they call them, they get radio, they have radio access to any employee right on the ground in the areas, as well as RTC, the RTC towers in New Edmonton. So, but again, just to have that communication and say, hey, look, we need to do better on this side. And as well, I was able to connect him with staff regarding some issues and concerns around the area of our sewer treatment plant. So I'm happy to say that there's some communication going on there as well. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Please, Council Weed.
Okay. Some of this we already know. July 15th, I had a Zoom meeting with Melanie Helmer in regards to the service establishment bylaw. And hoping to put it forward as an economic development agreement, which we know has already happened. On July 19th, I had a really brief meeting with Mayor Bussey, and it was really just I think just to help check in for both of our mental health and everybody else. I believe he checks in with council on a regular basis individually. July 25th, the Modi meeting. Very interesting. So the 10-mile slide is scheduled to be hard surface in the fall. Yes, everything is settled where it's going to settle as far as they're concerned. Station Bridge is to be completed by the fall, and hopefully the bumps on both ends will be taken care of to my husband's pleasure. Mission Mountain, BC Hydro manages the traffic management out there, and they have a new traffic plan in progress as far as length restrictions and whatnot. As far as Lillooet, the crosswalk on Main Street, and I believe it's the one by the Vic, is to have new LED shadow overhead box installed in the fall on the crosswalk. So nobody is pleased about it, but they're going to do it. And I did bring up the tunneling aspect after our last council meeting, and Mayor Bussey had forwarded me some information. Sandra Griffiths is going to check with the geotechs as to whether it's been investigated about tunneling at Big Slide or Mission Mountain. My guess is it probably has, and maybe because of the rock formation and whatnot, it's not plausible. I don't really know. It goes by volume and use, not just rock fall, as there's a lot of that on a lot of roads in BC. That's what we were told. On July 27th and 28th, I attended the SLRD meetings, open meeting, closed meeting, committee of the whole meeting. Of course, it was unanimously passed to bring this economic development services bylaw forward which I'm really pleased to have that part of it put to rest. Free stores came up in conversation, and mainly due to the one in Woolbridge that they wanted open right now. Apparently, they're being rebranded as a Reuse It store. So hopefully, they're going to be doing a presentation at our September meeting. And then maybe not, we'll get a free store once again. I did see on Facebook that Saldemere had posted rules, regulations, and all kinds of things for the free store up there. So I'm thinking it would be under the same premise, hopefully. And I'm not sure if it's up to the contractor update to monitor that. I guess we'll know more after their presentation. And we had a report on illegal dumping and the action plan. And I did bring up once again the hours of operation of our landfill, because I think it's a big deterrent to people who work and a big deterrent to the contractors that use it, their hours of operation and the days that they're closed. And I don't know what the fix would be. I'm sure it all goes around money and contractors and budgets and everything else, but hopefully that'll be brought back as well. So they will. The SLRG is joining the BC Social Procurement Initiative for 1 year, and then they will review the program. And I believe we did have a delegation or something on that quite a while ago. Yeah. And that's it for me until tonight. Thank you.
May I offer a suggestion regarding Ministry of Transport?
You sure can.
When they mention volume or use, don't be afraid to play the safety card. They say, oh, so then you think it's all right that based on volume of use that we get our locals killed on the highway. That usually makes them very nervous, and that's an area to push that we need to look at. Anyway, just for future. Thank you, Councillor Lee. CAO report.
Thank you. I have a few items. First off, and most important, Brad Gilbert. Let's stand up and say hello.
Hello.
This is the district of Lowest, brand new manager of recreation. Not to give away his age, but he's been working in public sector recreation since 1998. Ooh, it's amazing for someone. For someone in his 20s. But yes, he has a plethora of experience right across the country. He's very enthusiastic to join. But fire loves. And I got to spend a couple days with him, but he is full of creative ideas, partnerships, so I look forward. You're welcome. Thank you. Another Brad has also joined us. Brad Rosling has been hired. We only hire Brads now. Brad Rosling has been hired to fill a laborer vacancy in Public Works and Utilities. And he will be starting at the end of this month. Speaking of Public Works and Utilities, due to a number of issues that keep popping up, a variety of causes, aging infrastructure, extreme weather, things like that, our staffing levels right now, even when Brad comes on at the end of the month, are stretched to the limit. So council and the community may notice that some things we've come to expect are taking longer to get to. Like I said, some of these things have been building up, aging infrastructure, the lack of good equipment or appropriate equipment. But mostly seems to be the on the ground staffing levels are mismatched with our service expectations from the time before, where the infrastructure was newer and we weren't dealing with this now annual weather event. It's just weather now. So I do want to give my thanks to Public Works for doing everything they can to stay on top of these challenges, the water line breaks, some of the daily potholes that are growing faster than trees. And appreciate the public's and council's patience and understanding as they do work through these issues as quick as we can. No doubt there will be discussions this fall as we develop the budget about balancing expectations for service levels with staffing levels. We are at the limit at this point in the public works. Appreciation of the crew and appreciation for everyone's patience. And finally, of note, anyone at council or not at council who wants to be on council again, nomination packages are available for the upcoming elections happening in October. Those nomination packages are available online or at please.
Thank you, Mr. Deanna. Any questions, comments, for clarification from the CAO? Okay. Yes.
Mr. Denegar, did we have as many summer students this summer as we would have liked?
No,
Why?
it's an employees market right now, and the District of Lillooet is not as competitive as some other employers.
Why?
Pay rates.
Is that something that will be considered in the future?
That will be dealt with both through QP collective bargaining, which is occurring in September.
Mhm.
And we'll have to go to council for authorization of whatever the draft negotiated agreement would be to potentially make wages more competitive here. Because our bubble of competition keeps getting bigger. Competitors know that. So we are continually challenged to attract and retain qualified staff.
Cute. Okay. Need someone to move that the no, someone to move. But we don't need someone to move. Thank goodness. All right, item 18.1, new business. Stage 2 water conservation measures.
This report or this request is for decision for stage 2 water restrictions. It's a late addition to the council meeting. It's due to the onslaught of recent issues occurring with the water supply sources. Just as the first mention, we're not running out of water. This is just for a decision to determine the best actions going forward as we continue to face the operational issues of our treatment facilities. Just as a background, the water treatment plant is facing sand infiltration, which within its treatment processes, which has become very maintenance heavy. Like Mr. Jagger was saying earlier, it's taking just about all the manning and time that we have just to keep it clean and running, which takes away from the other duties that Public Works has around town. The infiltration wells depend on the Seton River levels, and the lower it goes, it reduces their capacity to retrieve water from this water source. And the UV treatment that it uses is a solitary one. Should it go down, there's no redundancy in place. To replace it while repairs take place on that. The rec center well aquifer has been continuously taxed more than any other year that we've had so far. It's frequently running 44 hours a day to keep up with demand, while the water treatment plant is being pieced back together. The sand barrages that we're getting causes this premature and unnecessary damage to the treatment processes. So the reasoning for stage 2 water restrictions is to prevent the high demand that is currently overwhelming our treatment process due to an unknown source of operational hardships from Seton River. And again, like Denegar was saying, the Public Works crew is doing a commendable job trying to operate with what they have available to them. If we keep going with this high demand, our system will become vulnerable. And should we have to resort to introducing Town Creek or Dickey Creek to the water supply to meet these demands, boil water notice will be mandatory, as they currently do not meet the Canadian drinking water standards. This will require testing throughout the distribution system to ensure that the main lines have been purged of any unknown contaminants that will be feeding into our systems before being able to rescind the notice and ensure the supply is once again safe for consumption. The staff is recommending that stage 2 water conservation measures be implemented so that we don't have to go to water notes.
Thank you, Mr. Scaliato. Any concerns, comments from Councillor Howe?
This one is actually for Mr. Denegar. Mr. Denegar, when we speak to, just going back to the Cayush Creek MOU or MTU, I think you had mentioned.
Possibly in TSA, it's full tank service.
And that was regarding water sources and
It would potentially, this will be coming to council when we get to beginning discussions. It would be the potential of providing services to the treatment plant. They are also reciprocally looking into potential water sources as well. But none of that's going to go forward until sort out issues of source.
okay, that was going to be my question is will the issues we're having with our water treatment plant be taken care of by the time we enter into that MTSA with Cayuga Creek? And if not, what kind of additional pressure does that put on our water treatment plant? As well as, even if the water treatment plant is taken care of by then, is working up to capacity, when we go on to water restrictions 1 and 2, and I understand this needs to be talked with Cayuga Creek and within the confines of the MTSA. However, will it be discussed whether or not they will also be put on water restrictions when the district is?
Yes, that issue came up during conversations with the last week. On how they themselves are already doing water restrictions in their own water system.
Okay.
And that expectation would be built into the agreement. Yeah, the underlying challenges have to be dealt with before we can possibly offer the service to them. But it also creates an opportunity for us to potentially get funding through federal funding that they have, especially people who has an MTSA with us, to get funding to help fund some of the systems that they help deal with these challenges. Right, so we're sort of approaching it very holistically. How can we work together to a win-win? It's being done very stepwise with some very experienced experts involved in these conversations.
Yeah, Councilor Lee.
I had brought this up the last year, and this came forward too. And the way we communicated the stage 2 water rating was through a flyer that was put in everyone's mailbox. I obviously, because I observe it being in that facility, the message doesn't get to people. We know that. At data last summer that it maybe helped a little bit, but not particularly a lot. I really feel like if we pass this, and I know that it'll take more staff time and a little more effort, but I think we would get better impacts that when these go into play, if we had 1 or 2 dedicated staff persons actually physically go knock on people's doors, where we know, knock on people's doors, handing them the information and being available to answer questions about what's actually going on. Because a lot of people, they'll see it and they throw the notice in the garbage or they don't read the paper. And then what's happening is that when somebody does report them and we do get the bylaw officer at their door, it's just creating vitriol and anger because, perhaps they didn't feel like they understood or knew why this was going in. I know it's a burden on staff to do so, but I do remember as a child, and perhaps, I'm not saying summer students would be the best people to do that, but I do believe when although our recreation employee, he was a summer student way back in the day, and he was actually physically handing out notices by the district about water restrictions. I do recall that happening, and I think we probably just need to go back to the book and do it the old-fashioned way. And it gives us the opportunity to explain what's happening, and I just think that's where I'm going with that.
Any other comments? Councilor Weed?
Yeah, I don't have any comments on water restrictions. I think with limited staffing, that what Councilor Leach is saying is a good idea, but I really struggle to see it happening. I was remiss in not mentioning you with the water plan along with Don Darling, because I know you worked on it as well. And I'm looking forward to some of those things coming to fruition. Because I think this is a really great job well done.
Good.
And hopefully you're enjoying your new bin down at the sewage treatment plant with its wonderful new wheels. Oh, yes.
Okay, good. I need someone to move that stage 2 water. Thank you, Ms. Galiato. Stage 2 water conservation measures are hereby declared active, and that the manager of public works and utilities authorized to declare when stage 2 water conservation measures are deactivated. Counselor Weave, second Counselor Leach. Any further discussion? Yes, Counselor Howell?
Sorry, I'm just reading the water to conservation measures, and it says that hand watering of flowers, gardens, vegetable gardens, decorative planters, shrubs, gardens, decorative planters, okay. Hand watering, otherwise it's every 2 or so days. I just want to make sure I get this right, because when we're talking about gardens, vegetable gardens, and we're talking about food security, I want to make sure that we are indeed allowed to water efficiently. So just give me one moment here. So is it only Wednesdays and Saturdays?
It's permitted.
It's permitted Wednesdays and Saturdays. Hold on, let me just make sure.
Let me jump in. The restrictions on days and hours are for irrigation systems. So if you have an irrigated lawn, that has to be timed for those days within those hours. I understand that the hand watering, say, a vegetable garden can be done at any time because you're focused on that activity and not just the system.
And this is a big garden.
Hand watering.
Okay.
Interesting.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Those against? Okay. Carried. Okay, we'll move to liability insurance. 18.2.
We should cap off the night with everyone's favorite topic, liability and insurance. We have a contractor with the district who is in need of liability insurance. He is the he's the experienced fire prevention and fire suppression officer with the city of Kamloops. Up until recently, he was able to obtain his own liability insurance. However, for various reasons, that has no longer become an option for him. And we do require that he has insurance for our own liability as he is acting as an agent for the district. We do have a number of other contractors who are associate members with MIABC, most notably our interim director of public works and utilities, our subdivision approving officer, and our contract bylaw officer are all covered under this scheme. We do require a council resolution in order to have them covered by MIABC. So we are here tonight asking for that resolution. This is one of those positions where it is more cost effective to have a contractor do it because it is on a case-by-case basis as the work comes up, rather than to have a full-time employee in the position. So we are recommending that council passes this for August 9th, 2022 until December 31st, 2022. And we will come back to council again, probably in December, which will be new city council to renew all of these again for 2023. Thank you.
Any questions or council? Oh, I need someone to move that Sheldon Hampton, fire inspector, be added as an associate member to the District of Little West Liability Insurance Policy, the Municipal Insurance Association of BAC, for the term of his consulting agreement being August 9th, 2022, December 31st, 2022, or until such time as the agreement is terminated. Moves, Councillor Leach, second Councillor Weave. Any further discussion? None. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay.
I just have one thing. Sorry. But it said it's earlier, previous topic. Drip irrigation and micro irrigation watering of flower gardens, vegetable gardens, decorative planters and shrubs and trees are also.
Okay. The meeting is open to questions from the media and public. Remember, there's a lot of bloody red meat that's been sitting on these tables that we've been hashing over. Just I'm giving you fair warning.
No, I just wanna, surprise, take us quickly back to item number 11.3, because I had a couple of questions. I'm not trying to challenge the vote. That's over and done with. But basically, just thank you all for a robust discussion. I think this was great, and the way you all expressed yourself is about the way my board expressed themselves, and I suspect the greater community expresses themselves as well. But I had a couple of questions about the way this bylaw is written, and I can follow up by email in case, you might not be able to answer them, or just to think about them for a little bit. But the first one is one of the points that was brought up. The resolution by the SLRD does contain in 2. The second point, the service being established, the regional board may enter into contract with external parties. So that may means that the taxing body, the SLRD at this point, has no obligation to enter into any contracts with anybody before deciding on the value of this tax. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I guess looking for it. So I
It's on page 66 of my package.
want to be the same.
Yeah.
Director of Corporate Development Services and something.
If I may. Generally, when something is worded like this, Mr. Mayor, it is the difference between entering into a contract with a third party or providing a service oneself. The DSLRD could provide the service with their own staff, but they're not going to lock themselves into that by saying, or they're not going to lock themselves into having to contract out by saying shall. So it is an option, and if they want to bring it in us at any point, this bylaw would need to be amended.
Makes sense.
Okay, so that means that, okay, they can offer services themselves and set the tax rate for those services. On the similar topic, the process by which that tax level is established is the SLRD budget process. Is that correct? Not the District of Lillooet's budget process.
No.
Mr.
Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regional districts work in a much different financial scheme than we do. They do have to have an individual budget for every service that is offered. So this service area would have to go through the SLRD's budget process. They would then requisition those funds from the District of Lillooet. However, as Councillor Weed mentioned earlier in the meeting, how that is determined and how that is contracted out will go through its own process, which will be a weighted vote when we voted on by the Area B director and the director from Lillooet at the time.
Right. And it still doesn't preclude the District of Lillooet council and staff determining the tax rate or not, so, correct? It isn't the SLRD that can demand or command that we tax our residents in this process. We make that determination.
Sure.
Yeah, and then one question on the property tax assessment. If I understand, if this continues to completion, on the property tax assessment form itself, will there be a separate line item for this economic development SLRD charge, even if it's budgeted to be zero?
Assumedly so, but I mean, it could be, what do you call it? Parcel tax, it could be anything, but that determination will, but obviously in the budget process, it's going to be clear and understanding, and the public will have knowledge and process of it. Mr. Taylor, can you add to that?
Actually, Joni may want to jump in if I get this wrong. But actually, Joni's just gonna jump in. It's always good to assume when I start talking.
I like talking about finance.
Yes, thank you, through the mayor. It wouldn't, I won't say 100% because we could always change it, but it most likely would not show as a separate charge on people's property tax bills. It would just show as part of the SLRD charge on their bills.
And my last question, is there an estimation of the property tax roll difference between the District of Lillooet and the SLRD Area B? How much of, for example, in the proposal is $4.30 to a total of $32,000. What percent of that comes from the property tax roll of the district versus the property tax roll of the SLRD Area B? Is there any,
My understanding that was pulled out of the report that went to the board is that's right across the board. So it doesn't matter if you own a property in area B or in Lillooet. If your property is worth $100,000, you would pay under a taxation scheme $4 and some odd cents towards that service.
okay.
That's if it goes through the taxation scheme.
And but generally, is there any estimation as to how much bigger the District of Lillooet property tax roll is than the SLB area B property tax roll?
I don't have that at the top of my head. That would be something we would have to look into the report package.
Okay, perfect. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the media and public? Yes, sir.
Hi, everyone. Amy Wolf, sitting chair for the Lillooet Agriculture and Food Society. And I just want to express my appreciation for your consideration tonight and discussion. And I also wanted to express that I appreciate all of your service here. I recognize it's a very difficult, volunteer and thankless position. I've had conversations with several of you on the topic discussed tonight. And I want to recognize that the heart of every individual is for the benefit of Lillooet. And that everyone's concern is common and just there's some there's some questions about the execution. And I just wanted to express A, my appreciation for your service, and B, my appreciation for all of your heart and your willingness to serve in this capacity. And that your heart is still for us farmers and all of our community members and the food security and the agricultural economic contribution of the region. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Next time you come, you can bring some more arugula. Yes, sir. Love it. Okay, any more questions from public? Hearing none, I need someone to move that the August 9th, 2022 regular council meeting be adjourned. Councilor Weed, second Councilor Howe. All the question, those in favor, carried. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, council.